Hey everybody, this is Mr. Maupin coming back at you again. Once again, this is another AP U.S. government video. This part 2 and on the topic of 2.7 presidential communication. Now, last time we were here, we were talking about the importance of presidential communication in order to be able to promote your policy goals. We also talked about the impact of early trendsetters in the use of modern presidential communication, like Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, and we looked at the impact of the State of the Union address. Beyond that, we know the president at the White House has a vast communications staff whose sole job it is to focus in on media relations. And remember, what's the point of media relations? Well, it's to promote your policy, to have good public relations. And yes, part of that includes answering questions of the media. We mentioned previously the responsibilities of the press secretary to represent the president with the media. But in addition to that, presidents also have their own press conferences traditionally. And what I mean by press conferences, I don't mean just the president delivering speech. I mean the president actually standing in front of reporters and answering questions they may have. And this has been going on now for about 100 years. But what's interesting about the frequency of these presidential press conferences is pretty telling. If you take a look at this graph right here, you can see in the very early years of presidents giving press conferences to the media, you were seeing that presidents were giving conferences or holding conferences in excess of more than one a week. But as we go through the second half of the 20th century, you can see that the number of press conferences drops from about once a week to every couple weeks. As we get into the end of the 20th century, down to about once a month. George H.W. Bush, does a little bit more than what modern presidents had. But as you can see here, starting with Nixon and pretty much everybody except George H.W. Bush, presidents have been delivering about one a month, which is not quite a lot. And for many critics, certainly not enough to meet the needs of what the media is talking about. Remember, the media would much rather hear from the president than from the president's press secretary. Now, that being said, you can definitely give President Trump some credit for, at least amongst his contemporaries, having more presidential press conferences than 4 out of the last 5 presidents. But with President Biden, we seem to have kind of returned to form, and we might be hitting, some record lows with President Biden. President Biden so far, and we are now, almost 10 months into his presidency, the president has only delivered 4 press conferences so far. That is it. So, this is a concerning trend for sure, because with fewer press conferences by the president, that means that there's less opportunities for the media serving as a watchdog to challenge the president, to force the president to have to answer tough questions and try to justify what they are doing. Now, beyond that, understand why there are fewer press conferences. Fewer press conferences by presidents is pretty simple. Why put yourself in harm's way in terms of having to face a critical media? Back in the days of, Coolidge and Hoover and Roosevelt and Truman and those folks, media access was very limited. So you kind of had to play to the newspapers in order to be able to get your policy goals across. And then the other side of that was that you had to answer questions that the media had. Well, what we have been seeing in recent decades is that presidents, the White House, are trying to have more and more control over the parts of media that they feel they can control, and trying to step away from areas of media that they feel that they have less control about. A lot of this is really about spin and manipulation. In other words, trying to maximize the positive media coverage that you have and minimizing the negative press coverage that you have. Understand that when it comes to press conferences, the few that presidents do have anymore, presidents do spend quite a bit of time preparing for them and trying to have basically rehearsed answers for what would be likely questions, rehearsed answers that would try to make the president look as good as possible. But even beyond that, we see presidents try to manipulate what the media tries to do. There are some examples from the George W. Bush presidency at the beginning of the 21st century that kind of shows you, to what lengths, to a certain degree, presidents are willing to go to try to manipulate that media to put out the best image they can in terms of coverage. For example, the White House, and no, this is not just the George W. Bush presidency, but presidents, historically have put out, media packages to local TV stations, for example, or even national TV outlets. But what the George W. Bush administration failed to do commonly was to put on the messaging for this, that this is from the White House. In other words, it's been approved by the White House. And when you're talking about using news, if you're a media outlet, there's a fine line between what is objective news footage versus something that might be deemed as government propaganda. We also saw, with George W. Bush, and remember, George W. Bush was president during some tough times: 9/11, war in Afghanistan, war in Iraq, Katrina hurricane, the collapse of the economy, and the start of the Great Recession in 2008. So we actually did see examples of trying to minimize the damage, the use of staged reporters at many of these press conferences to ask pretty easy questions that the president could easily answer and look positive in the process. Also, we saw the usage of trying to have close relations with conservative journalists with the attempt to try to write favorable articles about the actions of the president. Now, once again, it's not singular to George W. Bush, but we saw more of a frequency of this compared to other modern presidents. But really the name of the game, as far as modern presidents are concerned, is how much can you control the media versus the media controlling you. And for modern presidents, more and more, recent innovations in technology have made it easier for presidents to get their messages out directly to the people and bypassing traditional watchdog reporters through traditional media outlets. So keep that in mind. Now, understand that, modern presidents have to be able to have not only a message that's as direct to the people as possible, but is able to try to compete with the media outlets that are out there. So bottom line, if the media cannot get access to the president very well or in a very limited manner, it's not like news agencies, it's not like, TV stations and newspapers are just going to go out of business because they don't get as much access to the White House. They just then say what they want to say. They just, use their own interpretations and their own opinions as to kind of what's happening with the policies of the president's administration. And so presidents have to be able to use their platform to try to, try to kind of rise above what the rest of the media would be trying to broadcast. And, when we do talk about the usage of modern media, our last two presidents before Joe Biden have had quite a bit of an impact. Barack Obama and Donald Trump. These are 21st century presidents in their use of media. In the case of Barack Obama, as you can see here, Obama was the first president to use Twitter, to actually have a Twitter feed. President Obama was also the first president to upload content to YouTube. Previous presidents used to have weekly radio addresses, and then they would eventually have weekly television addresses. Starting with Obama, there was the weekly presidential YouTube upload of what the president wanted to kind of talk about that week. And to show that this is, a growing part of the president's, the part of the president's White House apparatus, you can see, we saw the West Wing, the White House office expand to include a new Office of Digital Strategy. In other words, how do you use this new technology in a favorable way for the president to be able to promote their policies, mitigate damage in the media, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, the White House really would love, in a perfect world, to be its own media source. That in a perfect world for presidents, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, you would love to be able to totally bypass the media. And it seems more and more like that is possible, especially as presidents are able to use technology to micro-target certain audiences. The ability to create certain types of media events and messages uploaded to YouTube that might be targeted to, for example, blue-collar steel workers or African Americans or members of the LGBTQ community, to working mothers, et cetera, et cetera. Controlling that media presence is more and more of an obsession for modern presidents. And it's not just what the president says, it's how the president looks. Image control is an important part of the process today as well. Presidents have had for a number of decades official photographers. Now note, if you are the official photographer of the president, you are not really an objective photographer. You are doing things that, though may not be totally staged, even when they are kind of candid, you are, promoting the images that make the president look good, make the president look human. Look at President Johnson right here with this cute little doggy, showing that, he is human. He likes dogs, that even though this is a time of war in Vietnam and tremendous, civil discord, the president is a human. Right here, from President Obama, meeting with one of the Olympic gymnasts to kind of show that he has a sense of humor, that he relates to the average American, relates to this idea of promoting American patriotism by athletics, etc., etc. You're not going to see the White House allow a negative image of the president come out. That's just really not going to happen, because that's not to the advantage of the president. So controlling that image is critical, be it through your voice, be it through your picture, etc., etc. And once again, as more and more technology allows for it, that means less and less access for the traditional media. And when we talk about, modern relations with the media, it has become more and more contentious as we've gone through recent decades. A little bit more contentious if there's a Republican in the White House, but still contentious no matter who you're talking about. And it's kind of come to a new level with the Donald Trump presidency. Donald Trump is going to, from day one, be associated with the use of Twitter and the common attacks that we will see on the traditional news. He is going to be coining the term fake news, and that has become such a popular phrase that everybody uses that today as a way to imply that, things from the media may not necessarily always be true. And, this has probably been, at least it was under the Trump administration, the biggest war regarding the media that we'd ever seen. Wars with the media over, for example, disputes over how big the crowd size was at Trump's inauguration. The fact that the president would describe the media as the enemy of the people on occasion. The lack of trust for the media by the Trump administration led to the end of White House daily press briefings, which had been around for nearly a century. He stopped that the last 2 years of his presidency. He wouldn't even attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is an annual event of, White House reporters that is a kind of a little bit of a bawdy occasion where jokes are thrown around, many of them at the president's expense. Trump would not allow that. He would not attend that event because he did not have a good relationship with the media. And as we get into 2020, here's just a few examples of some of the tweets that show Trump's war with the media. I mean, you can read some of these. And no, these were just in the first few months of 2020. So the idea being is, how far can the media be at war with the president? Is this good for the American public? What will this do for presidents in terms of trying to control their own image and voice even more? These are some important things moving forward. So I'm going to leave it there for right now as we're coming up on 50 minutes. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.